Everyone, welcome to our very first Shoots.Video webcast. I am Sarah Marince. I'm a voice talent and I'm also your host for this evening. And we have three very talented DPs with us here this evening to kind of talk about their journey and answer some of your questions. And so I'll go ahead and introduce them and then they're going to talk about themselves and a little bit about their journey. So we have Justin McAleese, we have Paul Olson, and Ashley Petrie. So if the three of you want to just kind of take it and talk about your journey, I'll let Justin go first.
Hi, Justin McAleese, Director of Photography, and do some other stuff as well, but mainly do that. I've been with this company, Blair Media, that we started around 2005, so I've been doing that for a long time, and graduated from Fresno State a long time ago with a video production degree, so that's my deal.
I'm Ashley Petrie. I'm a director of photography as well, and I actually just recently moved to Los Angeles. I've been here for about 10 months, and I love it. I'm coming here from Chicago. I studied cinematography at Columbia College, and I also just have some general crew experience, mostly in the grip department, and that has lent itself to a lot of my learning more of my craft as a cinematographer, but I'm really excited to get shooting more.
Very cool. Well, I think we're waiting for Paul to hop on, but until he does, we're going to go ahead and roll into some questions if that's all right with the two of you. So we're going to start with some of the terms. So what's the difference between videographers, cinematographers, camera operators, and director of photography? And whoever wants to take this first can go ahead.
They sort of overlap a lot, but I think that there's some important ways to look at it. I think if you were working on a movie, if you were the DP on a movie, you probably wouldn't want to be called a videographer. So I think there's a level of experience and intellectual thought behind it that probably elevates you to something a little bit different than what a videographer would be. But because everyone does video now, those are sort of interchangeable in a way. I think a camera operator doesn't necessarily have to be in charge of lighting at all. Like they can just be there to do to operate the camera. And on a union gig, a DP is always allowed to have a cam op, and so maybe a DP doesn't even necessarily have to run any camera, and they can let that person do it. Or you might have multiple, or however that works. So there's some gray areas there depending on what size of a production you are. But on union gigs, it's very well figured out. And if you're on a small gig, a lot of times the grip is going to pick up a camera too. They might be a camera operator, but that's not their main job, but they might be good at it. So that sort of thing can happen. I forgot the other one, but Ashley?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about someone that is shooting narrative cinema or television, the terms director of photography and cinematographer are interchangeable. I think it's just semantics and it's somewhat subjective, and a lot of it is going to come down to the preference of the DP or the cinematographer. They're usually going to say, I want to be titled and credited as this. That's what I'm doing. But I think the word cinematography applies itself more to the narrative context. You know, after all, the word cinema is the prefix in the word there. So there's that. But I would say that in my opinion, all cinematographers are DPs, but not all DPs are cinematographers. Like, I think if you're shooting something corporate, if you're shooting a live event or something like that, or a reality show is actually a really good example. Reality TV, I would say you're a DP. I wouldn't say that you're a cinematographer in that scenario. I just think that the camera work and the lighting that you do for the narrative format, it's just more refined. And like, that's really what makes it cinematography. I think that videographers, they shoot live events. They don't have a lot of control over what is happening in front of the camera. Whereas cinematographers, they do have a ton of input. They do offer input on the blocking, on the production design, on any little detail that is affecting the visuals. Whereas, if you're shooting a live event, you're there with the camera, you're just there to get it. You have all this creative input when it comes to like the way you shoot, with the focal length, with where you put the focus pulls, f-stop, camera movement. All those things are creative decisions that the videographer makes, but I would say it's something that's separate from cinematography, and that's what makes you a videographer. And camera operators are people that operate cameras. A lot of the times DPs are going to operate, they're going to be their own camera operator on their shoot, but if the budget allows for it, they're usually going to want to hire someone to operate.
Okay, awesome. And moving on, what's the difference between DP roles on a film set and a corporate video type shoot?
I think one thing that often happens on a corporate shoot is you might not have a director. So if you only have like a 3-person crew or something, you got like maybe a sound guy and a DP and a grip or gaffer or something like that, then the de facto director is the DP in that sort of situation. They have to sort of guide it along a lot differently than you would on a movie set or something like that, where the DP would never really be doing what the director is doing, because that sort of starts with the director. So I think that can be very interesting, and you have to have someone that's ready to take charge on a sort of small corporate type thing and do a lot of what the role of a director would be.
Okay, Ashley.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Justin is saying. I would also really, when I think of a corporate shoot, I think it's, there's two things that come to mind for me, which are you're there to serve the client, and it's really best if you stick to the plan. Like I think for corporate, you come up with these shot lists, these meticulous storyboards. Everyone has seen them. You hang them up and it's like, all right, this is exactly what we're doing. Boom, boom, boom. You're not really trying to, throw a lot of new stuff in there on the day of the shoot. You have all this pressure. You have the client right there usually, and it's kind of all about sticking to that form. I think on a film set, the difference is you're there to serve the director and the director's vision. And then what you're also bringing is like a willingness and an ability to improvise, to be able to watch a scene and say, oh, hey, like we planned on doing this handheld, but now that we're here, now that we're in the space and we're seeing it, maybe it is going to work better on sticks. Or, like we have an idea for a new shot. Maybe we can change this really quick. It's kind of risky, but creatively it can be worth it. And that environment kind of fosters that kind of creativity a little bit more, I think.
Okay. Hi, Paul. We got you on.
Sorry, technical difficulty.
Oh, no worries. So we're going to move on to this question. How do you plan for a shoot? And I guess, Paul, since you're joining us now, you want to take this question first?
I guess it depends on the shoot. I mean, I try to do as much planning as possible. Text locations and stuff is just super important, I think. For me, I like knowing how much power is available, what are our restrictions on, what can we change, what can we move, what can, absolutely, can't be touched, because you get into certain locations and it's, whether you're shooting at like a national park or something like that, or somebody's house, there's certain things that are just like complete no-goes, and it makes the day go so much easier to go, I would love a light here, and to just flat out know that, that's not going to happen, or let's get creative and figure out how it is, or, okay, let's make sure the generators are going to be able to run the lights all day, for everything. So, I mean, I think prepping the day like that really helps out, but obviously seeing the space and, getting an idea of how those scenes are going to come to life in the actual area, is just super important. So I like prep work.
I think, aside from all that technical type of stuff and logistics, which is crucial, I think going in knowing from the director or the writer, if it's like a smaller shoot or whatever it happens to be, is just having a theme in mind, like having an approach creatively. There's a thing I read a long time ago about Martin Scorsese, like breaks every movie down into one word. So maybe casino is just like greed. Maybe the word for that entire movie is greed, because you have a lot of questions to answer as a director for sure, but even as a DP of like, what's greedy to me? How do I convey that in every lighting choice or angle or lens or whatever that happens to be while I'm doing it? And so just having a general theme in mind, I think answers 100 questions that you wouldn't be able to think of beforehand. So you wouldn't be able to answer in any other way, except for you had like a heuristic, a measuring stick by which to do that.
Yeah, litmus test.
Yeah.
Ashley, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think there's kind of like an obvious process that a lot of us go through when we get ready. It's, read the script, have the meetings, talk shot lists and storyboards and location scouts. I think those things are like a given with every single project. But for me, I think what really helps me get prepared for what I'm about to do is talking with the director and finding what the visual references are that we want to use as an example for what we are trying to achieve. Whether it's other films or even just photographs or paintings, like just having a tangible physical example of what the goal is and what you're trying to achieve. I think that really helps everyone get on the same page. So while all these things are really important, I feel like once I can have like a few references of what we're trying to do, that really helps me know how to continue.
Yeah, it's important because when directors, especially if you haven't worked with someone very much, they're going to throw out a word, say organic, the most generic word that we hear a lot of times. And like, what does that even mean? And so that might be something entirely different to that director than it was to the last person you worked with. And so like you're saying, like concrete visual evidence of what that means to them is super important.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some nightmare scenario safeguards. Okay, what's your process to ensure footage is never lost?
The DIT, know who the DIT is, know how many hard drives it's going to go onto, be able to look at it after they supposedly transfer it, that sort of thing. I mean, that's everyone's nightmare, is doing it and then it doesn't show up where it's supposed to show up.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and from experience, I can say you can't just do a checksum. You can't just go, oh, all the bytes that were here went over here. You have to look at the footage because it's technology, and sometimes it messes up, and you might drop a few frames here and there. So we were shooting with the Red One, and power that was when we were actually plugged in, everything that was battery was fine. But when we were actually plugged in with the AC, something was causing it to drop a frame every about 5 minutes worth of roll. And so we lost like 20% of a film because we had bad frames in it that we didn't know until we actually got into pre-production. We were starting to do our rough edit, and it was like, yeah, like all this is bad. And it was, honestly, it was to an amount where we couldn't really recover it. It was too much to do reshoots with on a no budget film. And so, it was dead. It killed the project. Wow. That's rough, man. Yeah. I mean, being able to actually look at it, and there's obviously a lot of other reasons why you want to look at your footage, just to make sure you're not like sort of underexposing everything, or there's you could have a dead pixel on the camera and you'd never see that in like a small monitor while you're going it the other way. So yeah, it's super important to like get a good look at it on a big monitor.
Yeah, and I would say too, start dumping those cards before they fill up. There's no reason to like shoot out your media like that. If you're on a set where you have a loader, you have enough crew, you have multiple cards, hopefully, just pass them off when they're halfway full or whatever. There's no reason to wait, on the chances that the entire card might be compromised in one way or another. You can keep offloading them sooner, and then just back up your hard drives. Just back them up, have multiple hard drives, and then don't keep all your hard drives in the same place. Like even for me in my own personal footage, it's, I'm in LA now. My mom in Chicago has a hard drive that has all my stuff on it that's just a copy. It's like, God forbid, there's a house fire, there's some kind of an emergency, something gets stolen, whatever it might be, you just want to have another hard drive somewhere else. You know, if you have 3 hard drives, it's not necessarily that great if they're just all stacked on top of each other. You know, who knows what could happen? I would just say have them in different places.
That's really good advice. I like that. What's your favorite camera to shoot with and why?
For me, I would go with Alexa Mini LF. I would always choose a full format sensor for any narrative project that I'm doing.
Someone's Alexa is going off right
That's
now.
mine. It's my Alexa.
Amazon recommends another popular education and reference scheme called SAT Word of the Day. Would you like to?
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. She heard me say the A word, so she thought I was talking to her. But we all know what camera I'm talking about. The reason I like that camera so much is really because of how ergonomic it is. Like, you have all these great cameras with these great sensors. You put good lenses on it, you're going to get beautiful images. But with Arri, it's just so ergonomic. It can sit right on your shoulder. It's balanced. It's friendly for the ACs that are working with it. The menus aren't all finicky. You know, I've never heard any silly, crazy stories about those cameras like heating up or, you know, having these meltdowns in the middle of set. Like, I've heard those stories about Red plenty of times. I'm sure we all have. It's just such a foolproof camera because the people that made this digital cinema camera were making the best 35 millimeter cameras back when people were shooting on film. So they really have a perfect product, in my opinion, I think.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the other thing. I like Alexa's. I like those cameras, and I've had fun with the Mini and SXT Pluses and all that. I'm a Red guy just because I've owned one of those since 2009 or so, 2008. And shooting on the Monstro was really cool. I love being able to switch resolutions as I go, have a lot of options for overcranking, and be able to go up and down the ISOs. So that's super useful in a real world scenario where I want to change my depth of field or be able to just, like, instead of going from a 21 mil to a 24 mil or something like that, if I know that we're going to finish in 4K, I can go from 6K to 8K. And as long as we're not doing some VFX or something like that, then it's like an easy thing to be able to change my field of view on the fly. So that was super useful on the feature we were doing. And aside from that, it's fun to use new cameras. And I feel like that happens a lot on set these days is someone brings out the newest GoPro and they're like, here, figure it out, let's go. Or we have a cable camera of some sort, or we're doing, you know, any of the stuff in the sky. Those are different cameras. So that's part of the fun of the job. It's a little scary, but I like using brand new technology that just came out that we get to kind of beta test sometimes, which is, I don't know, that's fun too.
Yeah, I agree. I like shooting on pretty much anything as long as I can put Zeiss glass in front of it. Yeah, I like the Red personally because I like Justin. I filmed with it for so long. And I like the ideas of a lot of the little pieces of equipment that they have. Like I have the square shutter for mine. So I never get a flicker from any light. So it really allows me to go ahead and make whatever light source I want for the shots that I want. So, you know, I use a lot of, you know, LED lights and things that I've designed myself. And I can do that much easier than having to make sure that they are a flicker-free LED with a flicker-free ballast. And if I do any dimming, that all the dimming is done using voltage dimming instead of PWM and things like that. So, I mean, I just like all the little toy add-ons.
So, speaking of cameras and equipment, what's one piece of gear that you cannot live without? Besides cameras.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Zeiss, yeah. I like the Zeiss lenses, so.
For me, I would have to say a dolly. And depending on what the budget is of the shoot, you know, that's either going to be like a real full-size Chapman dolly, or it might be a slider, or it might be a Dana dolly, which is really cheap and accessible for almost any project, I think. But those Those like smooth, versatile camera movements, I just think they up the production value of anything so much that it's something that I would always want to have with me.
Oh yeah.
I guess I really like my pouch. I just have a pouch which has like a bunch of stuff in it. Having a laser pointer, having even if I'm the DP and I'm not really supposed to touch stuff, sort of that stuff, like just having a Leatherman on me is really nice. So I use chalk occasionally. Any of that stuff that's like in my pouch ready to go, that stuff's super useful to me.
Okay, cool. And what are some projects that you guys would like to be shooting more of, and why?
It's hard to say. We do a lot of different stuff, like a big variety. We went to Kenya last year. That was awesome, and got to do a bunch of wildlife stuff, looking at cheetahs and elephants and rhinos and all that for Microsoft. That was super fun. So I'm always down to travel and go to exciting places and look at exciting stuff. That's always a good time. But then for me personally, it's like as soon as I do that, I want to go do a feature. And I want to do something that's like way more hands-on. I can manipulate everything. I can make all the choices, or have the crew make the choices with me. And that's really intriguing as well. So it sort of bounces back and forth, honestly.
What about you, Ashley?
I would really love to do more features and music videos, I think, if I could do anything. I mean, really my interest in like the long form narrative is what made me want to work in the industry. So I'd really just like to get more experience with that. I think there's just so much room for creativity in those types of projects, and like the types of creative problem solving that you have to do on those projects. It's just thrilling to me as like a cinematographer and an artist. Like, you know, even on something like an indie feature, you're not really going to get the budget that you probably want or even think that you need. But then finding solutions to like jump over those logistical hurdles, it's just fun, and it just can bring out some really great results. And same thing with like music videos. I think that it's just the sky is the limit in terms of what you can do. Like the concept of a video can be anything. And some of my favorite videos have some of the most minimalist approaches to them. They didn't all have like big budgets or great cameras or anything like that. There's some that I love that were shot on phones. So I just think that like the creative environment that those types of projects foster, that really interests me. So I would love to do more of those if I could.
What about you, Paul?
Yeah, features. I mean, I love shooting features. It's definitely like that's what I
Okay, now for you guys.
Enjoy commercial work as much as anything. What? Am I cutting out?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh.
Just talk really fast, super fast.
Okay. I like features. Features good.
Perfect. Okay, and in just a minute, we're going to hop over to some of our viewers' questions. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box here, and we're going to get to them in just a minute. Before we do that, one last question that I have. Tell us about one of your biggest challenges on location that did not have to do with lighting.
I think sometimes you're pointing one direction and then, you know, a construction thing or a big truck or something that you can't move and you have no control over whatsoever, that shows up. That has happened a couple times, and you're like, you just can't shoot that way anymore. And so you have to sort of rejigger the entire thing and find out a different way to approach the scene. And oftentimes it turns out better. It's like more interesting and entertaining for you anyway. And so I think the great thing about filmmaking is that a lot of times when you pivot, it becomes, you do something creative that really turns out better in the long run. I think that's one of my favorite parts of that. And that's when teamwork gets to really shine too. We're like, sorry guys, what we were planning on doing is totally going to suck, and we got to do something else. And then everyone can join in and like make something better.
I feel like that happens maybe at least like once, even in a small way on sets. Like that's pretty common that things will happen where you need to adjust, right?
Yeah, super common.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Ashley, what about you?
I think my biggest nightmare was really just a scenario that I found myself in where When I was still in college, I was shooting a movie that was produced by the school, and it was a short that we were doing, and I had two 35 millimeter film cameras on a beach, and it started to storm. So just shooting on a beach in general is really difficult, even if it's a beautiful day. We all know that cameras don't like sand. Of course, we had the proper protection and we're taking the proper precautions and all that, but it being a student short film, it was slightly understaffed. And then, having two cameras instead of one, and then having the weather go haywire on us, it was just kind of chaotic. We got through it. The footage was okay. No one got hurt or anything like that, but just being in the elements has always been one of my biggest challenges. Like coming from a Chicago work area, it's not like LA where it's just beautiful and sunny and nice all the time. So that has always presented a lot of difficulty, a lot of physical strain on me and my crews. But we always have gotten through it.
Yeah, beach shooting is always fun. We've done that before. And the sand, no matter how well you wrap the camera, that's great, except then you have all the sand going into all the gears of the Steadicam. So at a point, it was like you could hear the Steadicam grinding. There's like, oh, I have to take apart everything. But we've got that. And I think one of the most frustrating was because it was like death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing, which was filming a feature in Northwest Arkansas during winter. So it was mostly outside. So it was like 12 to 14-hour days, pretty much outside all day. And by the 14th or 16th day on, like we had equipment just breaking, like the little snaps here and there, and little bolts that were plastic or not very good metal were breaking because they had just been in the cold for so long that they were just fragile. And it was just, like I said, it was just like, oh, now this broke. Okay, well, we already used all the spare parts on the other one, So it's always fun, creative, to solve the problem and move on.
I think I remembered one more thing, so a little bit different than that, because that one sucks. But like we were doing we were shooting something where we were trying to wait for a train to pass one time, and we got everything set up. It was great. We were waiting for the train, and we had looked at the schedule and all that, and it ended up taking like a legit half an hour longer than what we thought it was going to take to get there. And then about 15 seconds before the train shows up, the sun goes away and it looks garbage. And we had to take the shot, and we got it, and we ended up like not even using a train passing shot because it was just, oh man, that was awful. And like we had to move as soon as we got it, and we're like, dude, 15 more seconds on the sun, on the clouds, we would have been saved. So sometimes stuff like that happens and you can't do anything about it. What are you going to do?
Yeah. All right. So we're going to start with some of our viewer questions here. I like this first one. Okay. Talk about some crew do's and don'ts in terms of how they should interact with the DP.
I mean, I think it goes for anyone on set who you're talking to, who sort of in the chain of commands above you. Like, don't tell them what they should do. Say, hey, if you want to hear an idea, I have one about what might work here. Just like really approach it in a way to where you're offering ideas, but really be sure that you want to give it. If you're the gaffer, that's fine. Like you guys are sort of talking about everything on the same level. But if you're a PA and you're coming into it and just being like, hey, you should do this, or on my movies, I always shoot them this way or whatever, like really mind your tongue in those situations, because, and it's not even that you don't have a good idea. You might have the best idea, but for one, it's not your place to put it in that situation because you do that on your movie. And for two, a lot of times, what I've encountered is that like the DP and the director have already that idea was like 6 ideas ago. They've already moved way past that because there's a bunch of reasons why that won't work. And so that's what I've done when I was a PA, whatever, and I came up and I was like, hey, what about this? And I'm like, oh shit, they already figured out that was stupid a long time ago. That's why they're not going to use that idea.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to having respect for the hierarchy and the title of the person that you're working for, respecting that they are your boss. Like I've seen a lot of people kind of talk some smack about the boss or the DP, or just, starting all this, talk behind everyone's back about they're doing this or they did that or they made us do this. And it's like, you're really just bringing the morale of the whole crew down if you're kind of engaging in that kind of behavior. And so really, if there's something about the way the DP is running the show that is making things more difficult, there's a way to bring it to them that is respectful and that can solve the problem. You can always just say like, hey, next time I need you to give me this much heads up before we go on Steadicam. Or, if you want me to remember to change the diffusion filter on the lens, like, just tell me that. Don't yell at me if I forgot because I didn't know. It's like, it's just communication. There's a way to do it respectfully.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think respect is just the number one thing. Be respectful. We're all here to be, collaborative and do the best product that we can. And I mean, sure, once in a while you'll meet somebody who's just not interested in anybody's input. And again, you got to respect that, if they're over your head, then that's the way it is, and try to do the best you can to get the vision of that person, get what's in their head out. And I think for me, a lot of the times too, I say, if you are having any issues or anything like that, don't let it fester. Don't let it, bring the morale down. Don't go around doing weird things. Just come and talk to me. Like, very rarely are you ever going to hurt my feelings on anything, or, I'm never going to see something and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Like, very rarely. So it is much easier to just handle that as it comes up, instead of it being like day 15. It's like, I can't believe you did this on day 2. And it's like, dude, I guarantee you, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. So another question, do you guys really think things will go back to what it was before?
I think there's going to be a run for actual production work. I think there's going to be a ton of stuff happening, whether people are trying to be weird about touching people or touching things or shaking hands or any of that stuff. That's probably going to be a little odd for a while, and just being in close proximity, I think. People will be weird about that, but I think there'll be a ton of production here because stuff needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do so much with motion graphics and still photography and stuff like that. I mean, eventually you have to have a production, and to do a production requires X amount of people in the same place at the same time. So yeah, I mean, things might change a little bit. There might be a lot more hand sanitizer on set, but it's got to get done. So
yeah, for the most part,
way to do it than to.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will, because people are hungry for content now more than ever. I know there's a lot of producers and production companies that are brainstorming, how do we create content without bringing people together? And they're finding ways to do it, and they're coming up with some interesting ideas, but nothing will ever replace the quality of production that you get when you bring people physically together. So I think that as soon as we are cleared to do that, we will be doing that, because we all want to get back to work, and people are hungry for more stories, now more than ever.
Yeah. What are some subtle technique qualities that separate the greats from the amateurs?
Purpose. I mean, if you're doing something just because, you probably shouldn't do it. There should be a reason that you're doing everything. Everything should be thought of. I mean, sometimes things can happen by happenstance, and you can go with it at the moment because it felt right, and that could be the right call. But I mean, I think for me, throughout my career that I've experienced for myself, is don't make a decision just because. Think of why you're doing that. Does that shot need to move? Does the camera need to float? Don't just use a piece of equipment just because you have it.
Sometimes what you leave on the truck is more important than what you take off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ashley?
Yeah, it's a similar thing. I mean, it's about having an approach that you stick to throughout a production if you're talking about a feature or something, and like really concentrating on staying consistent, which can be super hard because over the course of 3 weeks or a month or even longer, like it can be easy to forget what you've established and then go into something else. And it feels like it's a month apart, but then when you look at it in the edit, it's 5 seconds apart. And suddenly you're like, oh, I should have paid a little more attention to how I was approaching that scene versus the next scene. I've definitely made some mistakes in that. And I know that I cringe when I see it on the big screen or whatever. But, you try to get better over time and just maintain that consistency throughout a production.
When it comes to cinematographers, I think what separates the greats from the amateurs, I would say I've thought about this a lot, and it's really two things. It's one, knowing actually how to light, and two, like maintaining your own sense of integrity as an artist in your craft. I think there's a lot of people out there that they just kind of hire talented people and kind of like ride on the backs of like what the people around them can give without maybe having so much knowledge themselves. But I think like the truly great DPs, like they have that knowledge. They're not just looking at a gaffer and saying like, yeah, whatever you want to do. They know what they like Paul, you were saying earlier, there's a purpose behind it. There's intention, there's a plan there. There's a real sense of like what the craft actually is. Because there's kind of a lot of people that can kind of get away without having that, but the real great ones, they really actually know what they're doing.
And when I listen to DPs talk on podcasts or things like that, I think they're continually finding ways to be inspired too. I think that's super important, is just approaching something with new, fresh ideas because they're out living their lives and like breathing and feeling and thinking and pondering and stuff like that. I think that can be really important. I will always hear them talking about like, oh, I'm so into this thing, and so I want to incorporate it in this next movie. And that's always really inspiring.
Cool. All right, moving along. Where do you get your inspiration from, and what helps you get inspired to come up with the look for the projects you are working on? Speaking of inspiration.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's funny, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I said my piece.
Yes. Ashley?
Like kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, just figuring out what the references are going to be. I'm normally going to try to look for at least 1 or 2 films that have a style and a tone that I think speaks to what we're about to do. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna like copy everything that they do, but I'm definitely gonna try to get like a strong sense of what the approach was behind that project, and then think about ways that I can apply like some of those tactics into what we're about to do. But it could come from anywhere. Like the obvious go-to is to look at other films or other music videos or whatever if you're doing a music video, but any type of art can be inspiration for what you're about to do. Paintings are great, photographs are great, music can inspire certain visuals. And just everyday life, kind of what Justin was just saying. He's like, these other DPs, they're always trying, they're not only living their lives in the film world, they're out doing other things, and they're going to apply that to what they're going to do. And some of my best teachers in college always said that. They were always like, guys, get out there and travel and see the world and just experience life. And that's going to make you a better artist and give you inspiration and put intention behind what you do at work.
Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mood boards and the, examples of like, oh, I want that feel is very important. We always set up like a Dropbox with everybody, and you just add in like, oh, look at this photography, or here I took this picture because I was out, and like, oh man, like, oh yeah, that's what we want to see, that feel of it, whatever it be for whatever project. And I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of the same people and over again. So you kind of have a shorthand with them anyways. But, you know, watch a few movies or listen to a few music, you know, like those things to where you're on set and you can go, oh, dude, you're like, what about this thing? And like, you can not even get the sentence out and the person is like, dude, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Very cool. Wait, what was that, Justin?
I'd say it's really fun to be able to share common references and just like get excited about the thing because you get that idea.
Yeah.
And that's why watching a lot of stuff is important too. And not even just all the, you know, not just the Oscar movies, whatever, but things outside of that. Because I think bringing a different genre to, if you're doing a horror movie and watching a romantic comedy might be useful, because if you're only watching horror movies, then you're going to do the same stuff that everyone else is doing. So I think being cross genre is important too.
Cool. For producer and directors who have hired you, what are the best things they can do to empower your success and the best work?
Be honest about what our sandbox is, like what we have to work with, how much time we have, if we're going to be rushed the entire day, if the crew that you're giving me, if I didn't hire my crew or something, like how green they actually are, just what the criteria is and how much the client is going to be involved in like dictating what we do. I think just understanding what we get to go do and how that scenario is super useful.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is just kind of being on the same page with where we're at with, you know, budget, equipment, locations. Like, don't falsify it. Don't try to make it be bigger. We're all in the same boat. Like, there's no reason for that posturing, you know, and don't cut me off on the knees if I need to go get something. And I, you know, had that planned for months because, you know, it's obviously in the script and you say you're going to take care of it and then you don't, kind of thing. Like, all I need to do is know that you're not going to. It's fine. I can take care of some stuff. It's just the communication more than anything. It's just be honest, be open. I mean, everybody is trying to do the best that they can. Nobody wants to waste their time. I mean, not that I've seen anyways. So, I mean, it's just be honest, be open and get it done. I mean, that's.
What do you think, Ashley?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things would be allocating the proper amount of resources for the scale of the project and the expectation of the outcome. I think the worst scenarios that I've been in or that we've all been in is where there isn't enough money for what you're trying to do. And if you find yourself in a scenario where you don't have enough crew, you know, obviously we all understand that we have to sometimes cut corners some places and that saving money is an issue, but it can become like a safety thing when you're out in these crazy locations and you have these huge setups and things that are requesting a lot of gear, and then you don't have enough people to properly execute it. Or then you find yourself getting into these really like crazy days where you're going over 20 hours or something like that. I would say stuff like that is just like a safety concern. So you can do a lot with a little. I totally believe that. You know, I can work with a really small budget. I think we all can, but then it's just scaling everything down accordingly, saying, okay, if we only have this much money, we're only going to have this much gear and we're only going to do this much. And then it's appropriate.
So sometimes there's, if you remember the scene from Dumb and Dumber when Jim Carrey goes in and they only have like $20 to spend or whatever, and he goes in and he comes out with a big stupid hat and he's got his like ball thing and he totally wasted all their money. Sometimes producers do that and they do it with good intentions, but you're like, why do you have that big stupid foam hat? That does us no good right now. And so just like talking a little bit ahead of time and being like, hey, I could spend money on A or B or C. What do you think? And we'll be like, oh, B for sure. Don't even waste money on A or C. Those things suck. I think that's a good scenario that you can avoid if you talk it out.
Yeah. So communication is key.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we're going to take one last question from our chat box here. What are your favorite resources for training and education, more online outlets and education sites versus films and TV?
I mean, YouTube has a ton of tutorials. There's so much stuff on there. The Society of Cinematographer type stuff, those are really good. Yeah, there's a lot of magazines that I like, whether they're online or not. And even looking at like videographer type stuff is useful too, because a lot of times they have new little great tools that are relatively cheap that you can incorporate into your workflow that work really well. So I think staying on all levels of what's new and what's out there is pretty neat. A lot of times when you're looking at American Cinematographer, that's like stuff. If you look at a 5-year-old issue of that, that's stuff that on the level that a lot of us do things, you're almost able to do stuff at that level. So don't be worried if something is a little old. If it's like big movies, that stuff is still like hard to do.
Yeah, it's amazing what is on YouTube these days, and it's just more and more all the time. So that is such a great resource. And honestly, even just, Googling anything, you'll be surprised what you can find. I was a couple months ago going through the manual for the area cameras, and it was just, all the information is there. And there's just so much stuff online. Even like, I remember, I haven't looked at it in years, but Roger Deakins' chat board where he personally responds to people's questions, it's all still there and it's all available. So with the internet, there's very little that isn't available to you, I would say.
I was on Red User one time and I saw someone post about the latest Spider-Man movie, and they're like, hey, what light do you think that the DP used in blank blank? And like the DP responded and he's like, oh, I used to, and you're like, whoa, mind blown, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of DPs that love to like share their process and just put everything out there. So it's awesome for people that want to learn.
Yeah, there's a guy named David Mullins, and he has a thread on there that's been around since day one, and it's like Ask David Mullins or whatever. And it's like 5,000 pages deep because there's so much stuff, and like he'll just type out anything you want.
Pretty cool. Paul, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, it's the internet. Google it. If you're thinking about doing it, somebody probably has also. So there's probably something, even if it's just a question of somebody going, hey, I want to do that same thing. And you can at least chime in and go, did you ever figure this out? Or, where are you at with this? Let's figure it out. There's a lot. For me, I also like the electrical engineering side of it. So I'm always on like Adafruit or something like that to try to like figure out a tutorial of like something neat that's coming out, with the Bluetooth and everything now, you don't have to even set up like little Wi-Fi's, and then you can control all your lights and you can get all these neat shots that before were just so hard to choreograph. And now you can just have it ahead and you go, and then it just does it.
Very cool. Well,
special shots for practical stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here, Justin, Ashley, and Paul. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in this evening. And if you have any topics that you would like to discuss on future webcasts, please share them on the blog Shoots.Video/blog or on any of our social media accounts. Again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
You might be looking at Shoots.Video and thinking, so how does this all work? Is this about A, setting up the whole crew for me, B, just giving me options and having me handle it, or C, something in between? Well, it's D, all of the above. To put it simply, we're here to help you in any way that we can to get the crew and talent you need for your next production. We believe that every level of video production can benefit from a well-maintained list of qualified crew members for every position. This goes for pre-pro, on-set, and for post. Every project is different, so if you need a producer to help manage the decision-making process, then we can totally do that. If you're already a producer and want to build your own crew from scratch, then go for it. We're here to make your next production a success. And if you are crew or talent looking for producers that want you, then you've come to the right place. Sign up now, and also leave a referral for any solid people that you know that are already on here. Thank you for considering Shoots.Video, and happy shooting!